Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and today is a guest that I've been friends with for some time now, and we finally made time for it. Elliot Coen, boutique Blu-rays with Elliot Coen. How are you, buddy?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here because, like you say, it's long overdue, and yeah, it's going to be good fun, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy thinking. I feel like we knew each other like before all the craziness of the world happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
Um, Even like just like watching each other's content before, the madness. But now it's a problem, right?
oh yeah, it is, and because I remember we had that conversation probably early in the
Yeah.
pandemic, didn't we?
Hmm.
And we did that video as well, going through some of our
Seven Deadly Sins.
Seven Deadly Sins.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Uh,
Yeah.
I can't even remember what we chose, but
No, I can't. So I'm going to go back and watch it after this,
yeah,
see what we picked.
I'll have to link that down there for people if they don't know that video. That was a lot of fun. So,
Yeah.
but yes, it's been some time that we've known each other, and yeah, like I said, big fan of your content, and and actually we just missed each other. uh,
We did, yeah.
yeah. So how was your time in New York?
Yeah, it was great. It was so hot though. The weather was just so hot, and it is like that today. I brought it back with me. Like I'm
Great.
sorry to all the viewers out there if my brow is sweating, but you know we got to do with it. You know.
I also brought some English heat over. Well, they don't normally have heat, but
No.
over back to in Missouri when I got back, it was it was in the 40s and the hundreds here for that Celsius Fahrenheit. So yeah, it's brutal, and I hope it passes. I'm ready for the fall. So,
Yeah, and like because we don't have AC or anything, I started thinking, are all my Blu-rays going to start melting? Because they're all just plastic, and
the room
that would be
temperature, that's a big thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Oof. Well, I hope they're safe.
Yeah, if not, I'll do a video on all my Blu-rays that started to melt.
Oh, it'll be just like those. What are the ones that like had disc rot from like the late 2000s?
Yeah, was that Blu-rays or was that DVDs?
I think both, but I know there was at least a good batch of Blu-rays. I don't remember which company, but they had like a lot of disc rot problems.
Right. Yeah.
That's something I don't want to think about because it's we don't.
No, I haven't encountered that at all yet in
Yeah.
my own collection. So
Hopefully these last their life. So
yeah, true.
we've invested a lot. So anyway, other than that, you've been keeping well.
Yeah, yeah. No, things are good. Yeah.
Yeah, good. So before we jump into the film journey for people watching at home, what we do is we like to have our guests talk about their earliest film memories all the way up to where they're at now and all those good things in between. What have you been recently watching? Any of those criterions you just recently picked up?
Yeah, so literally this morning I watched The Flight of the Phoenix, which is that it's starring James Stewart, and it's about this plane that crash lands in the desert, and all of the survivors, they have to work out how are they going to get out of this situation. And it was a pretty good film to watch today because I could feel the heat through my own window. So it was like an immersive experience. But yeah, that was a great film. I'd seen it a few years ago. But yeah, and then last night I watched Shaft on 4K.
Ooh, nice.
Um,
How's the transfer?
it looks amazing. Again, I saw that film years ago, and I don't remember it looking so naturally filmic. Everything is preserved, and it really looks very nice. So yeah, I was very pleased with that.
I still need to jump into most of my criterion choices that I picked up. I've just been kind of in my own little world. Well, vacation doesn't help, right? And then
No.
when you get back to it, you kind of like, well, I just bought all these things. What do I start with? So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And beyond that, what else have I been watching? There was a few of those HMV premium collection ones that I picked up recently. So there was another James Stewart film called The Shop Around the Corner. Have you heard of that one?
yeah, it's a
I
great.
think
Movie.
I think that's got a Warner Archive disc over there. But yeah, so that's all I've been watching this
Good
week.
stuff. You're dreaming of Christmas now, I guess. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I should have saved that one for Christmas, really.
yeah. Well, I mean, you watched it. Early August. We always say something about July and Christmas. I don't know, but
Yeah.
well, those are some good watches, and good luck to you tackling those 40 other.
I know. Yeah. See, the thing is, there's some Criterions on my shelf that I bought from the last sale that I still haven't watched. So, yeah.
At least it's only the last sale. I have like a few sales back. So.
Well, it's funny because I did that very long video going through my whole collection, and in preparation for that, I actually did a lot of watching of stuff that was unwatched because I kind of felt embarrassed by how many were unwatched. So
it can get a little overwhelming. I feel like that's one of the things we talk about a lot, but that fear of missing out. Luckily, Criterion doesn't go out of print too often.
True.
So, but yeah, I have a sizable over there. I'm looking at it right there, staring at the collection that hasn't been seen. I'm like, I don't want to keep seeing it get bigger. So.
Yeah, true.
But anyway. Those are great watches. There's a few that I need to watch still, like Shaft and Flight of the Phoenix. But let's jump into the film journey. What are some of your earliest movie memories?
So if we're talking earliest movie memories, it's going right back to my early childhood. So being 5 or 6 is probably the earliest I can remember now. But when I was that age, all I was watching was Disney films because we had a VHS player, and my parents would buy us, the Disney classics. So we had things like Bambi, Beauty and the Beast, Peter Pan, things like that. But also some more niche ones, actually, which I don't hear talked about a lot. Do you know The Rescuers?
Yeah, The Rescuers is great.
The two mice. And we had the sequel as well.
Down
Rescuers Down Under.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it is just nostalgia for that time, but I've rewatched those since, and I have a fondness for those too. They may not be the best storytelling, in Disney's catalog, but I have a fondness for those two films in particular, for sure.
I haven't seen those films probably since the VHS era. So that's how long it's been. So they're definitely due for a rewatch. I don't even have them on my shelf. So yeah. What about that next step? You were collecting VHSs, or did you rent anything?
No. So I mean, in terms of collecting, that actually came much, much later in my life. So that was in my early 20s that I got into collecting Blu-rays. So before that, I did like watching movies, but I wasn't, a movie fanatic. The things that I would see would be big popular movies, often movies that are big franchise movies. So like The Lord of the Rings or the Batman films or Star Wars, Harry Potter, those kind of things. So those are the memories I have from the VHS days and from going to Blockbuster Video and renting things. But we never really had much of a collection when we were younger. Although I do remember, actually, my dad was quite an early adopter of DVD. So this was probably mid to late 90s, I think, when DVD first came about. And I remember some of the films that he would have in his DVD collection, which I was too young to watch, but I ended up watching them anyway. So I actually remember watching films like Austin Powers, the first one.
I also watched early. Way too early.
I was probably 7 years old when I saw that. Right. And it's funny because I remember really enjoying the film and laughing a lot, but obviously all of the kind of adult jokes would go straight over my head.
Exactly.
And it's only now watching it as an adult that I realize, God, I shouldn't have been watching that film. Another one that I remember from the period was Rush Hour with Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. That was one I watched a lot. And that was my first encounter with Jackie Chan. And it's only now being, into film and collecting films, that I'm going back and actually watching his Hong Kong movies and seeing where he started out.
Oh, no, now we're gonna go the Hong Kong route. I can't do this.
No, I'm by no means am I well versed in that stuff yet.
Neither
I'm
am I, honestly.
very much a newbie.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a film that I can remember. And then I remember two other films that my parents had. We had Heat, the Michael Mann film, which I remember watching, and I think I was quite scared of it. Obviously, it's not a horror film,
Well, it's still very scary.
The centerpiece heist sequence, and just how loud the guns are, and everything in that scene. I remember being quite scared as a child watching that. I shouldn't have been watching that. And the same with LA Confidential.
Oh, wow.
Another one. So these are all like late 90s films that my parents owned. Yeah, so those are some early memories that I shouldn't really have had, but
well, I mean, those are intense ones. That's at least you got the new Heats on 4K now. So
yeah, I've not watched it yet, but I've heard some mixed reviews about the disc. But yeah, I'll see what I think of it when I watch it.
Yeah, I still haven't picked it up myself. I'm waiting for everyone else to talk about it. So,
yeah.
No, those are some fun early memories. That brings me back to especially Austin Powers. I also watched that with much innocence and didn't know what was going on. So.
Yeah. And besides that, around the same time, like a formative experience for me was seeing the Star Wars trilogy when it was reshown in the 90s, the special editions or whatever. They got a theatrical re-release. So I remember going to all of them with my dad, and then we later got the VHS tapes of those. And that was like a whole start of an obsession with Star Wars. So yeah, that was quite formative as well.
Did you ever collect like the memorabilia, like toys or anything?
Oh my gosh, yeah! Don't get me started. We'd go to Toys R Us. Sorry, can you hear that plane? There's a really loud plane going on. I'll wait till it's done. So yeah, I remember we would go to Toys R Us here, and they'd have racks and racks of the Star Wars figures in the blister packs or whatever you call them, and we'd be looking for certain ones, and we just like rifle through them until we found C-3PO or whatever it was. So yeah, that was definitely an obsession.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's the same over there, but Toys R Us is RIP. So
yeah, it's all gone now.
Yeah. But I did the same exact thing. I actually have some fun Star Wars memories of I forced my dad in buying me battle droids. Like I just, for some reason, I'm like, you can just get one, of course, right, to represent. But I'm like, no, like I need many so I can like fight these together. And so I think for Christmas one year, I got like 6 or 7 battle droids.
Yeah, I remember the same, because there's no point having one of them. It was the same with the stormtroopers as well. I had probably 5 or 6 of them.
Got out of hand. That started was that with like the start of like kind of the collecting aspect?
Probably that. I think actually looking back, that was the first thing that I ever collected. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, same here. So that's a good memory.
So it's all George Lucas's fault. That's
all right. So George, if you're watching this,
no,
that's we also released the original, but
release the original cut.
No, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. No. So I guess you watched the prequels and stuff. What was kind of that next step in like the early 2000s were, I guess, because you said you were an early adopter of DVD, at least your father was. So what was that next step like?
Yeah, so we would buy lots of DVDs, but again, I wasn't a collector, because I think throughout my teens and up to my early 20s, when I really switched into film mode, from that early teens, I was very much into video games. That was the big thing. So I'd collect video games rather than anything else. It was video games and Magic the Gathering. That was
We
basically
can
it.
talk about too.
Yeah. So those were the things I'd collect. It wasn't really films, but we did have. We didn't have shelves, but we just had like a big tub. We had a big box. We just kept all the DVDs in there. I remember we had the Star Wars prequels, Lord of the Rings. We had those, the extended edition ones that came out. Have you got them? Yeah, those ones behind you. So I had them as well. I had all the Harry Potter films. Well, the early ones anyway. Stuff like I had a lot of Adam Sandler movies.
As did I.
Yeah, so I remember having like Mr. Deeds, stuff like that.
You still
really
have
like
those?
I am actually. I
Yeah.
really like Mr. Deeds as well, and I'm surprised by how many famous actors it's got in it.
It does. Actually, well, my best friend, he's up in Canada at the moment, but anytime we're on a phone, like somehow a Mr. Deeds quote sneaks in there. I don't know how, but he's like, yes, Mr. Puffy Jacket Man.
Yeah, and I love like now after watching The OC in my teenage years, I love anything with Peter Gallagher in. So he was in Mr. Deeds as well. So yeah, I still love that movie.
Yeah, it's those Sandler films. We grew up exactly at the time that we needed to watch those, because otherwise we watch them now and be like, well, I don't know if anyone would have.
Yeah, and I think the trouble is like those films exist for a certain audience and for a certain mood that you're in to watch that kind of film. And I could imagine now if we were watching them for the first time, we'd immediately start comparing them to, critically acclaimed films that we love. So I can understand why people really don't like them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a real soft spot. Yeah.
As do I. At least he's making, films still, and he's making some of his best films lately. So, that's
some of his dramatic work is really good.
Yeah. So moving on from the fond memories of Adam Sandler and Star Wars. So you into like the late teens, kind of early 20s, you were starting to jump into more filmmaking, or like IMDb or something like that?
Yeah, so it was my early 20s. So up to then, I was really big into video games and music and stuff like that. And for whatever reason, I was going through a period where I was getting a bit bored of the stuff I was into. And my brother, he's a big film fan as well. And I would hear him talk about all of the films that he really enjoyed, and I'd never seen any of them. So he would talk about films like Pulp Fiction, The Godfather, Fight Club. You could name any popular, critically acclaimed film, and I hadn't seen any of them. So one day I was bored and I thought, let's just give it a shot. Let's just watch one of these films. I think I actually watched a few in a day. And then from there, something clicked and I wanted to go through, all the critically acclaimed films. So yeah, it was actually the IMDb top 250. That was the starting point. So I'm trying to remember now what would have been the very first films. I remember watching Drive. Drive was one, because at that time it was quite a recent film.
Yeah,
it had only just come out, and I remember hearing people say how much they loved it. So that was an early one, and I remember watching that and really enjoying it, but knowing that this was not like stuff that I'd watched before, And I think that's what intrigued me, knowing that there was some kind of vision behind it that just felt so weird. It felt unusual to me. And from there, I watched, Taxi Driver was one I watched. Goodfellas. And then Pulp Fiction. I watched a bunch of Tarantino stuff. And yeah, I just got hooked, and I just wanted to watch more and more and more.
Did you go back and like watch Heat and LA Confidential? And
yeah, I did actually. Yeah, quite early on, because I remember. So from watching them as a child, obviously I didn't really get what was going on, and then when I was going through the top 250 list and those films were on the list, I was quite surprised, because I didn't think that my parents would have been watching some of the best films, made or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was surprising. And then I went back and watched them, and I got, the intention of the film.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So basically, yeah, all those popular films in the top 250 IMDb list. And there were a few that I watched that were not in the English language, which was literally foreign to me because I didn't watch anything that was not English. So yeah, and that just got the ball rolling. And it was very quickly that I found out that the films that I couldn't easily get online on Netflix, I had to then purchase the Blu-ray disc. So yeah, I just remember one day I went into the local HMV, and back then they had quite a good deal on. You could get 5 films for £30, so £6 each.
Wow.
And they had such a massive selection. This was obviously none of the boutique stuff. This was all the studio films. But it was a great, affordable option, to get into watching these films. And at the same time, I fell in love with watching the films in, good quality. Because previous to that, I'd been watching them on Netflix on my tiny laptop screen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was really that time that really sparked, and led to where I am now.
Where you're at now. Yeah. Well, I'm curious about kind of some of that in between moments too, because I know that because you've been on YouTube for some time now. When did was the fact that like you were transitioning from like DVD to Blu-ray, or was there anything that sparked kind of your interest in like joining like this platform or anything like that?
No. So when I joined YouTube, I wasn't making videos about Blu-rays or film collecting. What initially sparked it was I was watching a lot of film reviewers, people like Chris Stuckman and Jeremy Johns and people like that.
Yeah, same.
And at the same period, I just recently bought the subscription card to my local cinema chain. So it's I'd pay £15 a month, but I could go and see as many films as I wanted to. And in doing that, I decided, I'll start doing some review videos. And maybe one day I'll be like Chris Stuckman, and this will be my job, and whatever else.
Yeah.
So yeah, the very first video I did was in 2016, and it was a review of The Magnificent Seven, the remake.
Yeah.
With Chris Pratt.
I've still not seen it.
Yeah, I've not seen it since doing that video, which was 6 years ago now. So yeah, that's how I started off, and then I don't know what it was. I think I did a video on my Blu-ray collection, or I think it was actually just when Criterion started releasing in the UK, was around that time. So I did a video, and then that video got so many more views than those other videos I was doing, and I also felt more fulfilled talking about that stuff than the movies. So yeah, that's just kind of how it led to where I am now.
I mean, I feel like I've had similar journeys, but also the fact that people like you on the platform in general, like kind of just sparked, because I mean I was very similar in the sense where a lot of the stuff that I started out with were also movie reviews, mainly from the fact that I was watching Chris Stuckman and Jeremy Johns and the like, and then eventually started getting into the collecting side of things more so. And I feel like for me, like you were kind of saying, it felt more fulfilling, right? To like talk about the things that you kind of really enjoy, and I mean, and here we are now. So
yeah, well, that is exactly what you say, in that I didn't just want to talk about what was new in the cinema. I wanted to talk about what I was really enjoying, and that just happened to be the things that I was buying on Blu-ray. So yeah, that's just how it turned out.
Yeah, we're lucky in that regard, even if it's not necessarily our full-time job, but
Yeah.
still fun, right? So, what about some, I guess, recent developments? I know you changed your name not that long ago. I also changed my name. Yeah, but you want to tell me more about your more of the focus?
Yeah, I changed the name of the channel over 2 years ago now. It feels like it was yesterday, but yeah, 2 years ago. And my reasoning for doing it was that I wanted to make it more clear what the focus of my videos were, because I had a lot of people that were enjoying the videos, but a lot of comments were people saying, "Can you please talk about films rather than, discs and releases and the quality of a disc?" And I'd reply to them and say, "Well, this is what I'm actually into. This is what I want to do." So yeah, I thought I'd make it a bit more clear that the channel is about collecting and physical media, not just about movies in general, even though I like to talk about the movies themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's helped people, understand what the channel is about. So yeah, that was my decision, my rationale for doing it. I don't know if it's helped things. Hopefully it has.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I like I did something similar to where I changed my name because I had saw what you had done, and I also
Mm,
thought about it more like it's like, well, I feel like I just want to talk about everything, right? But I also want to make sure that I mean, the main focus of what I wanted to talk about is kind of something that's paired up with my name, right? With
mm.
what I already had going on, so it made sense to me. And I mean, for what it's worth, I think you're doing a good job, with that narrowed focus, right?
Yeah, because what I wanted to do was with my channel, and when I'm talking about films that I want to recommend to people, naturally I want as many people to hear my words as possible. It's good for me because it grows the channel and it gets me closer to, my end goal of doing it as a living or whatever.
Right.
But for the viewer, I want to reach more people. Anyone who's trying to share their enthusiasm about something naturally wants to reach as many people as possible. And what I found in making videos on YouTube, the more narrow you are in what you talk about and the more consistent on that topic, YouTube tends to promote the videos more to the same people, and then that grows it out, things like that. So, that's a lot of the thing that goes into my decision of talking a lot about Criterion and 4K discs. I get a lot of people asking me, why don't I talk more about Indicator or Arrow or BFI or any of the boutique labels? And the issue is, if I do that and I'm mixing it up all the time,
Mm.
then there might be someone who collects Criterion but doesn't collect Arrow. So if they're a subscriber and they don't watch the Arrow video, YouTube is going to not promote my next video to them because they didn't watch my last one as long. So it's kind of a fickle system, the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah,
And
I've noticed that.
it's kind of like, well, you could either literally do whatever you want and do videos on everything you like, every single topic, and you can mix it up as much as you want, but then it's not going to reach as many people. So it's kind of a balance. You've got to do. I always talk about things I enjoy. It's always movies that I enjoy and whatnot. But yeah, it's a fine balance, I think.
Yeah, that's that catch 22. I feel like because, like you're saying, YouTube is a little bit fickle on that, and I've noticed what the focus is, and a little bit more on what returning subscribers want to watch. But
Mm,
it's interesting too because I struggle with it. I'm like, it's like, well, I want to talk about this really badly, but then this one has like no views because I put all this effort in it, and
mm,
but it's I feel like that's a common thing for, I mean, for anyone who's watching this. If you also make videos yourself. I'm sure a lot of people understand that weird algorithm that we don't really understand. But anywho, I'm glad that the focus has been working out. So, although it doesn't help that I'm across the pond and I want all the things in your neck of the woods and vice versa, right?
Yeah, it just makes it very expensive.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I hope Criterion opens up more over there, and I hope things like Indicator and well, we have Arrow over here, but yeah, that's the fun thing. It's like I keep importing stuff. So
Yeah, and it just adds to the cost.
yeah. But we're living in a pretty decent age for physical media. So all right, I want to transition a little bit to some of your favorite films that I already know one of them quite well.
So is this favorite films of all time kind of thing?
Yeah, so I'm thinking like, what are some of your favorite films growing up until now? That would be maybe kind of my question.
Okay. So I guess we kind of touched on when I was a child, the ones that I really enjoyed. So Austin Powers at a young age, even though I didn't get the jokes, and Rush Hour. In my teenage years, when I wasn't really watching many films, there were still a few that stuck out to me. I really liked Napoleon Dynamite. Did you ever watch that?
Yeah, I did.
That was one that we had on DVD. I think my brother bought it, and yeah, we just watched that loads. But then, yeah, it wasn't really until getting into movies and collecting Blu-rays that I started to solidify what my favorite films are. One of them, I guess the earliest favorite film I have is The Empire Strikes Back, the Star Wars film. Because even to today, yes, some of it is nostalgia, of course, but even just trying to look at it objectively, which is impossible, by the way. You can't look at films objectively, but trying to as much as possible. I think it's a great film. I really do. And not just a great sequel, but it actually works so well as a film on its own. You don't even have to have seen the film that came before it or the one that comes after. On its own, it's just this great tragedy story, this great familial tragedy. I just think it's great.
Yeah, it is. There's a reason why a lot of people think it's the best Star Wars film, and I also agree with that. So I mean, yeah, the film is incredible, and I'm kind of thinking like in the future is like if I ever have kids or something that I'm like, when do I show them this, and like what's their reaction going to be?
So. Yeah, no, exactly. And in particular, the cinematography in Empire Strikes Back, which was done by Peter Sashitsky, who worked with David Cronenberg a lot. It's just a really good film to look at. Like, there's a lot of stunning imagery in The Empire Strikes Back, more so than in the other Star Wars films, I think.
There's more iconic moments, and when I say that, I mean I'm picturing like the scenes, exactly what you're talking about. It's the DOP and kind of what they chose.
Yeah, and as well the set design, the different locations in the film, different planets and things like that, it all just make it so memorable. And yeah, I just think it really is a great film in and of itself, not even as part of the big Star Wars story.
Mm-hmm. So what was the next transition from Star Wars?
So I guess beyond that, it was when I really got into watching films, and I started to figure out some films that were definitely favorites of mine. So early on, one that I watched was Paris, Texas, the Wim Wenders film. So I watched that quite early on because it was on, I'm not sure if it's in the IMDb top 250. Maybe it is. But I think I found it. What I used to do, as well as using the IMDb top 250, I'd look up filmmakers and see if I could find what their favorite films are. And that actually brought me a lot to Criterion's website, because they have the top 10 lists from filmmakers. So I think I found it through looking at someone's list. But I remember watching that film and feeling like this is something different. I wasn't used to this kind of filmmaking. It is, if you're coming from a perspective of watching lots of action and popular films, it is a very slow film. You could almost say not much happens in it, but actually a lot happens. It's just on a much smaller scale. And yeah, I just remember it really stuck in my mind for weeks after watching it. And I decided, yeah, this is a favorite film of mine.
Incredible. It's one of my favorites.
I was actually scared to rewatch it for such a long time because I didn't want to rewatch it and realize it's not as good as I thought.
You still have any movies like that, kind of? I have a few that I can still think about, but I just don't want to watch because I don't want to tarnish that memory.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think all of my top favorites I've seen twice or more. But yeah, there are definitely films. I can't think off the top of my head, but there are ones that I imagine if I went back and rewatched, I might be more critical, or if I'm in a different mood or whatever it is, I might not like as much.
That's fair. And what about another certain title in the collection that we like to poke fun at you for?
Yeah. So obviously my favorite film is Barry Lyndon. Oh, you've got it there.
I need to send this over to you to sign it.
No, that would make it worth less. That wouldn't be worth more. Yeah. So that came about. I had on Blu-ray. I had a Stanley Kubrick box set, and it didn't have all of his films, but it had. I think it was a Warner Brothers box set, and it had about 8 films in. So I watched 2001. I watched The Shining. I watched all of them. I think Barry Lyndon was the last one that I watched, apart from Eyes Wide Shut. And I watched it, and first time watching it, much like with Paris, Texas, I thought, this is long, this is a bit slow. And I remember straight after watching it, I wasn't like, oh my God, I have seen the most amazing film ever. But again, it just stuck in my mind. And I think that's what happens with really good films that you connect with. Sometimes it's not an instant effect. It's like a lingering one. And then you revisit it and it's still as strong or even stronger. And that's what happened with that one. In particular, it was the music. So the soundtrack that Kubrick chose for the film is a mix of classical music, Irish folk music, some military music and some of the army sequences. So there's a real mix of music, and I was listening to that over and over again, and I could visualize the scenes in the film. And it was then I knew that I must really like this film if this is the effect it's had on me.
Well, it's funny you brought up both Paris, Texas and Barry Lyndon, because those are actually 2 vinyl records I have on soundtrack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like that. And I have maybe 10 like scores, and those are 2 of them. So, I mean, the scores are that memorable. I mean, yeah. So. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, the Ry Cooder guitar soundtrack on Paris, Texas is, that's what I think about when I think of the film. I hear that music playing in my head.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the same with I brought this up like ad nauseum, I feel like, but Assassination of Jesse James. So
oh yes,
anytime I'm like, anytime I think of Nick Cave or Warren Ellis, I'm just like, that's a movie that just immediately like conjures up in my mind. So
yeah. In particular with Nick Cave, I only really got into him or knew him through movies, so I didn't really know his music before movies, and I've since listened to his stuff, but it's really movies like Assassination of Jesse James and The Proposition, which is one that is great as well.
Still need to see that one.
Oh, it's great. I think you really enjoy it. It's not an easygoing watch though. It's quite brutal.
Yeah. Well, it looks great. It's sitting there on the watch pile. I have a watch pile, but actually from you and Sam and Chris. all people like, I should watch this for their sake, but I'll do it eventually.
Yeah.
So speaking of some of those films that I feel like this is a good transition to talk about some of your favorite people who are involved with it, or some filmmakers. What about directors? Do you have any favorite directors that you enjoy?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think recently, do you remember I made that top 50 list? It was kind of like a rough draft of my top 50 films, and we
Yeah,
shared it in
that was
the
fun.
group. We shared it in the group chat. But I looked at that list and I saw that the films that I had, the highest quantity of films from one director was actually from two directors. It was from Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. So maybe due to that number, that maybe they're my favorite directors. They're certainly up there. They're
Oh, yeah.
certainly because my top three films are Barry Lyndon, The Empire Strikes Back, and The Red Shoes.
And
So
there's Hal Pressburger at the end right there.
yeah, exactly. So the films that were in my top 50, I had The Red Shoes, A Matter of Life and Death, Black Narcissus, and The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. All four of those are just classics for me. So yeah, perhaps it's them. The Red Shoes, when I first watched that, that was actually one of those experiences where I watched it and I really was amazed. It didn't take me long to realize that I loved what I'd just seen. Because I came across it because I'd heard Martin Scorsese talk about it, because he has a strong bond with Michael Powell. That he became friends with Michael Powell before he passed away, and obviously Scorsese works with Michael Powell's wife, Thelma Schoonmaker. She's his editor on like all of his films, pretty much. So yeah, and he helped restore The Red Shoes and some of the other Powell and Pressburger movies. So yeah, I watched that for the first time and I was just amazed. Have you seen The Red Shoes? I can't remember.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I had similar thoughts when I first watched it.
Yeah, because I remember watching it, and obviously it isn't. The film isn't striving for realism. You're watching it, and it's like a fairy tale.
Mhm.
Obviously, The Red Shoes is a fairy tale, but it's a ballet about a fairy tale. And just when it got to that central 15-minute sequence, the ballet sequence with no dialogue, and this is coming from someone who has no interest in ballet at all. Just watching that sequence, I was just amazed, like just transfixed on the screen. So I knew very quickly that that was one of my favorite films.
Yeah, that sequence is. I mean, that's the reason that when the 4K was announced for that, well, because there was like what 6 films that were announced when initially 4K. That and Menace to Society were the two. I'm like, I need these immediately.
Yes.
So those are the two I wanted. But I still haven't seen the 4K of the Red Shoes. Have you?
No, neither. No, because I just got it when I was in America. So I've got it sitting in my house ready to watch. Maybe tonight might be the time.
If it's too hot, it might as well see them sweating on the screen.
Exactly. Yeah
That'd be good. So Powell and Pressburger, yeah, those are I feel very a little embarrassed that I still haven't seen about half their films. I have Black Narcissus over there and also Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, but I still have not checked those films out yet.
Yeah, they're definitely well worth checking out, because like The Red Shoes, they're quite magical in how they're constructed. It isn't a realistic story, but it's also not quite melodrama on like a Douglas Sirk scale. It's right. It kind of hits a fine balance of magical, whatever you'd call it.
Realism, magical realism?
I probably wouldn't call it magical realism. I don't know what I'd describe it as.
Yeah. It's its own beast. That's the thing too. Because I would have a hard time describing what I've seen from Powell and Pressburger.
I think the way I describe all of the films is they're like a fairy tale.
Like a fairy tale. Now I'm going to start talking about
it. Oh yeah.
Well, actually, that's probably why I like those films too, because I like that kind of. Ever since Lord of the Rings, it just kind of went down that fantastical route. But anywho, What about some of the other people who are involved with filmmakers? I know that I normally ask about actors and actresses, but I want to ask about maybe cinematographers or anyone else behind the scenes that you enjoy.
In terms of cinematographers, see, the tricky thing with this is that often the crew on a film doesn't get talked about as much as the director. So it's very easy for people to come to know certain directors, but you really have to do some digging and actually look at the credits to see who has, shot a film or who did the costumes or the music or whatever. An obvious choice as a modern cinematographer is Roger Deakins, and I'm sure everyone would say that off the top of their head. But his films really are, they have such a unique look, and he's obviously he's mastered the craft, in all of his years. Because I've watched a load of his early works. He worked with Alex Cox when they made the Sid and Nancy movie, which is in the Criterion Collection.
So yeah, Roger Deakins is definitely the one that would come to my mind as well. What about
if we were going back in time, so some of the more famous ones that I like, going back to Powell and Pressburger, they worked a lot with Jack Cardiff, who was he was very proficient with using Technicolor process. So that's why all of those Technicolor films from the period look so good.
Yeah.
And he was highly sought after by many directors for that process, and I think he was quite selective with who he worked with. He also, I think he worked with John Huston when he made The African Queen, with Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. So that's another Jack Cardiff film that looks great with the Technicolor. And beyond that, I really like James Wong Howe from the 40s. He did The Sweet Smell of Success with Alexander McKendrick, and he did a load of film noir and dramas from the period.
That's maybe. I mean, I feel like with film noir in general, I feel like the camera work is probably almost even more important than the director sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because when you're working in film noir, and it was such an expressionistic, what would you say? Because it was all monochromatic, so you're working with black and white, but you want to use a lot of shadow to portray emotions. It was very important that you had a good artistic cinematographer. Going back to the German expressionist films in the silent period, Karl Struss was the cinematographer who worked with Murnau and created all those great expressionistic images, and he did come to Hollywood as well and work on some films. But yes, particularly in noir, cinematography is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And on the Criterion disc for Sweet Smell of Success, in the special features, it's like a featurette with James Wong Howe, and he's on a film set, and it's like a tutorial on how to light a scene. So he's got all the lights rigged up, and he can turn them on when he wants, and he's taking you through it, like how he would light a scene on this small set. So that's a fascinating special feature.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, because that immediately conjured up my mind that scene in Barry Lyndon where you can lights, right? It's weird because you don't think about like we were saying, it's behind the scenes. You think you have to go through a director or an actor or an actress, usually to go down that rabbit hole of looking at who the cinematographer or the director of photography or, et cetera, makeup. But yeah, that reminded me of Barry Lyndon with that artificial light in one particular scene. I remember.
Yeah, because for a long time I thought that they used completely natural light on Barry Lyndon, but of course they didn't. They did have to use some artificial light, but it was mostly, there was a lot of candles being used. Apparently they had big bins full of candles that would be under the actors, and it would be so hot because you just had all these flames like, on the set. So that must have been quite unbearable, especially if you're in those period costumes.
And reshooting over and over and over again. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, doing 80 takes just for one line. But when you look at the effect and the final product that we have, you know, as a consumer, we'd say, yeah, it was worth it. I don't know if you were in that position working, was it worth it?
yeah,
That's always the conversation with people talk about Shelley Duvall in The Shining,
right.
and how apparently she had a really tough time of it. Was it worth it? Was it not? You know, it's just interesting debate to have.
Yeah, it is, and it's one that's not really talked about too often. So it's very interesting. I feel like times are getting definitely better.
Oh yeah,
of course. Hopefully, fingers. But speaking of actors, actually, actors and actresses, what are some of your favorites that you've developed enjoyed over the years?
When I think of my favorite actors, I always go back to the 30s and 40s, and I look at like the screwball comedies. So, you know, Cary Grant, James Stewart, Katharine Hepburn, those kind of people, William Powell. I just like when they're on screen, they're so charismatic that, you know, you can't take your eyes off them and you're listening to every word. Yeah, so 30s and 40s, just because that was the period of movie stars. And some people say that's something we don't have nowadays. We don't really have the traditional movie stars where you would go and see every film with a certain actor in. Because you knew that if you went and saw a Cary Grant movie in that period, that you'd probably have a good time if you liked him. But nowadays, you might have an actor you really like, and they might be in some pretty not so great film, you know. Maybe they've just cashed in, they just wanted to get some quick money, which I don't blame them, by the way. I think that's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
If I was in their position, I'd definitely do like one arty film, one commercial film, and, you know, just go back and forth. But yeah, like the real movie star has kind of been lost, you know. I don't know who. Maybe Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise and maybe Brad Pitt, but like
Yeah.
that was I would say maybe the 90s were the last time that kind of movie star thing happened.
Yeah, maybe, because even if you say Brad Pitt does a lot of great films, and I remember talking to some friends who were like, they were quite big fans of Brad Pitt. They weren't big moviegoers, but they liked him in films. So I said, "Oh, you should go and see Ad Astra, which is this new sci-fi film." And I told them to go and watch it, and they hated it. They just thought it was this boring space nonsense film. So it's not really the case that like people would go.
They're not drawn to just because there's Brad Pitt doesn't mean they're going to watch it or like it.
No. Yeah. So, but yeah, to answer your question, yeah, definitely those 30s and 40s stars, particularly Jimmy Stewart, because I love Vertigo. That's one of my favorite films. So yeah, he's definitely
usurped now when the new list comes out.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued as to what's going to happen with the Sight and Sound list. But I'm sure we'll talk about that nearer the time, won't we? Yeah,
we will. Yes. So stay tuned for people who are watching this. We'll have our thoughts on this and
yeah,
hearty debate.
In terms of modern actors or more modern actors, from the 70s, I really like Gene Hackman, George C. Scott. I really like Robert De Niro is an easy choice. Yeah, and then modern actors. I'm struggling to think actually. I know you mentioned In Bruges before. I really like Colin Farrell. Like I'll watch pretty much anything he watches, anything he's in these days.
Yeah, I'm a little. I'm a little too fanboyish of Colin.
Yeah.
Farrell, so.
And I thought it was great. His performance in the Batman as Penguin as well, under all that makeup. Because it's funny, if you look back at his career, there was a period where people would say that he made a load of not so great films. Even some of them I quite enjoy, like Phone Booth. That's like a guilty pleasure. Yeah, it's a silly gimmick film. But yeah. And I like his work with Yorgos Lanthimos as well.
So. Hopefully, we'll see. I mean, obviously, he's going back to McDonough, so we'll see if he goes back the Yorgos too. I mean, that'd be fun.
Yeah, because I saw the trailer for that film. I've forgotten the name of the film, but the trailer.
This year, I think is.
Yeah, so it looks very much in his style of dark comedy.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
back to this. Leave Three Billboards. Leave
yeah.
Missouri City. It's not good. You don't want to go there.
No, to be honest, Three Billboards didn't really get me as well.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think it's because mainly when I talk about that film in particular, I like to think. I think it might be because he's got the outsider perspective of looking at kind of the American political system.
Yeah,
Which would be the same over there if we went over there and started talking about what's going on in Ireland.
yeah, for sure.
It would be kind of a little lost in translation.
Yeah, yeah. Although actually, so going back to favorite actors, I'm actually a big fan of Sam Rockwell. I think he's quite good. He's not always like a leading man, or he rarely is a leading man. But even in his supporting roles, he's always, funny to watch.
Yeah,
but also quite a serious actor as well when he wants to be.
Yeah, he's got a lot. He's got a good range to him. So
yeah.
Well, those are good. Those are some good choices. Now, I guess transitioning, I kind of did the reverse here, but if you could be in any one director's film, like as an extra or as a lead or whatever you want to be, who would you think you would choose?
What I'd say, this is quite a pragmatic choice. Because I'm not an actor, I'd need a very strong director. Because I can't remember who said this quote, but they said there's no such thing as a bad actor, only a bad director. So if you've got a good enough director, they can turn a bad actor. They can get a good performance out of them. So I'd probably say someone like Alfred Hitchcock, who, he famously hated actors, or he didn't like working with them. But if he knew exactly where to position me and tell me exactly how to say this line, and then I'd be immortalized because I'm in a Hitchcock movie. So yeah, I'd probably say that.
That's a good. That's a good choice.
Probably my way of thinking about it.
Now the real choice is which Hitchcock film, if it existed, which one would you want to be in?
So of the ones that exist, I mean, yeah, I'll just say Vertigo, because then I'd be in the best movie of all time,
right.
According to the Sight and Sound poll.
Great. I'm kind of wondering what scene you'll be in, but
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones to choose from. That's a good choice. I don't even know if I've answered that question still.
Yeah, what would you choose?
I don't know. I mean, speaking of McDonough, I mean, I like it a lot. Him. I honestly, I would enjoy being in a Richard Linklater film, of course.
Yeah, that would be fun. I think those kind of films would actually be very fun to make because of the rehearsal period and like the bonds that you'd have with the other actors and the director in that period. I guess would be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
because you get to play a lot and experiment with lines and performances and character.
Yeah, I will say though, I don't want I don't want long lines, and I know he's definitely somebody to write some lines. And I was like, I just want to be in the background. Maybe I'll say a line or two because I'm like, my memory is not that good.
Yeah. I don't know how actors do lines.
I don't get it either. Yeah, I mean, you have to be someone special, like those two, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it, but they do somehow.
Yeah. So some actors just read the lines off the floor, like Spencer Tracy or Marlon Brando. They were famous for just, getting the lines on a wall or somewhere and just reading them.
Well, the amount of Spencer Tracy films that are like in a courtroom, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. There's ones where like he's literally got his words on the floor. And like he'll look down at the floor, and you think his character is like deep in thought or something, and he's just looking at the lines. I mean, that is a skill as an actor to pull that off and make it look like it's real.
So yeah, that's the reason why we remember Spencer Tracy, of course, too. Great actor. So I would be very much like that. And not good at the the delivery execution, but I would have to have some lines somewhere. Right.
Yeah.
But now the hardest question I like to ask is one that depends on how many people have seen this or not. But if your life was a movie, what title would you give it?
That is very difficult. Where do I even start? Because the thing is, I think because we live our own lives, we often think that they're quite boring because we lived them.
Right.
So, but maybe to someone else, my life would look interesting. Yeah, I don't know what title I'd pick. Something really boring.
Something really boring.
Yeah, that's the title. Something really boring.
I like it. And honestly, it may or may not be apt, the title. So depends on the viewer, right? Which
Yeah. It's interesting that question of is your life exciting or boring? Some things are actually good to be boring. You know, you don't want an exciting airplane flight. You know, you want a boring flight. So maybe if your life is boring, that's good in a way. You know, you're just getting through it. It's fine.
I need to start reminding myself that. Unfortunately, that's kind of how our cultures are, a little bit more of like you need to be excited about something, and it kind of tricks yourself into thinking like, well, sitting around is not good, even though it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, other cultures, you know, who focus on spirituality and meditation, just sitting around and thinking is a great way to live life. Whereas in our cultures, yeah, if you're not aiming to be a millionaire and have lots of people love you and follow you, then what are you doing with your life? That's like the message you get from advertising these days, I think.
Yeah, and we're not helping with the movies, but at least we're able to get you to sit there, right, and just watch a movie. So you're doing that,
of course, yeah,
to an extent. So it's a good title. I like it.
If I think of one that's better, I'll get back to you, and you can.
I'll put it in.
Let me know what you think of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll even put it in the titles like real. I'll be like edit this just in.
or anyone who's listening to this, let me know what you think my film should be called.
Yes, let us know in the comment section down below. Yeah. Make it interesting, but
yeah. And make it friendly as well.
Of course, make it friendly. Yes. Remember, there's people who watch this that we care about. So, so the question I like to ask at the end: how has this medium changed your worldview or your outlook on life in general? Has it changed anything?
Yeah, film has absolutely changed the way I look at life. I think when I think of where I was when I started really getting into films 8 years ago. I've learned so much through films. I've learned about other cultures, other time periods. It's been a great. I've learned about history. It's been a great, educating force, in my life. But also, it has taught me, and I've spoken about this previously. It's taught me things like gratitude and, how to have a more positive outlook on life. Because sometimes you watch films and the things that these characters go through are just absolutely unimaginable. You couldn't imagine. But obviously people do go through these things around the world. And just watching a film can be a reminder. It can remind you of, the fragility of life and what people go through. It can act as a memento mori. It can remind you of your own mortality and that you've kind of got to make the most of it. So I definitely get that from watching films.
Yeah. And that title too.
Yeah, that title. Yeah.
I always struggle. I mean, that you put it in an excellent way that, that I think gratitude is one of those things that really stuck out when you were talking, something that I feel like a lot of us don't think about too often just because of how things, just how, obviously our systems kind of set up to where like, that instant gratification, I mean, even collecting this, right?
Yeah.
Is something that a lot of us fulfill, which, this is a positive thing to like, of course, but you know, those little things of gratitude, or that boring life aspect too. You know, I feel like this medium helps a lot with that.
Yeah, like a filmmaker that I really like is, do you know Hirokazu Koreeda, the Japanese film director? He makes films that are mostly about family, and they are dramas, but they're quite easygoing, but they are very emotional. And yeah, those are films that just made me grateful for what I have and the family I have, and just the simple life. There's nothing in those films where it's about someone who's really famous or wildly successful. It's all about small family units and the importance of that.
And I mean that I think that's at the end of the day, that's probably the most important thing too, is to focus on kind of the important things around you, right, in your life, and being thankful for that. So I wholeheartly agree. Elliot, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Do you have any final thoughts on everything?
No, I agree with you. I had such a great time having a conversation with you as always. Yeah, it's just fun to talk about films because in my everyday life, I don't have many close friends who are as into films as I am. So it's people who I know through the internet, through YouTube, who I can really have in-depth, fun conversations about everything to do with films and collecting. So yeah, again, I'm grateful for the fact that we have this opportunity and we were able to meet through our mutual love of these things. So yeah, that would be my final thought, I guess.
And until we actually do meet each other in real life, that will be a lot of fun. So
yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely probably buy Barry Lyndon again from HMV.
Yeah, buy every copy that you come across. Just buy it.
Listen, we don't need anyone else having this film. This is yours. So,
yeah.
I love it. Yeah, no, this is a great community, and I'm thankful to be here and to have met you and so many great friends that we share, and also people that we haven't just met yet. So,
true.
Thank you all for watching this. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and we'd love to hear your titles down in the comment section down below for Elliot's new film about his life. Now, real quick, where can everyone find you?
So you can find me on YouTube if you just search Boutique Blu-rays with Elliot Coen, or just search my name. It'll probably pop up. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Well, once again, it's been a pleasure having you on. So
thanks very much.
Yeah, and for everyone watching at home, this has been an absolute treat. And this is coming up when this is coming out. This will be near the end of August, so this will be a nice treat into the fall, hopefully. So we will be a little bit cooler, hopefully, by the time this comes out.
Yeah, hopefully, yes.
Fingers crossed. So yeah, if anyone wants to join in the conversation or have any extra thoughts that they have, please down in the comment section down below, just encouraged to engage us there. We'll be there as well. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to follow Elliot down in the link down below. And thank you all so much for watching. I did it again. Give it a like, share, hit the notification bell, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.